Yamanami seems to be one of those servants that people forget in FGO, and I wanted to look into his lore before doing this video to see if there was a precedent for that, you know, him being this kind of wet blanket of a character that nobody remembers, and his lore starts out pretty promising. You know, as someone that doesn't know as much about like Japanese history and stuff, I was like, oh, this guy's the vice commander of the Shinsengumi. I mean, we've got Okita, we've got Saito, you know, we get Shinpachi next year. There's a lot of really cool dudes in the Shinsengumi, but then he just ends up leaving, gets captured by Okita, and then commits seppuku. So there's really nothing going on that's super impressive with this character, and I do think they reflect that rather well with his design. His different ascensions kind of have him as this very mild-mannered individual that seems a little bit more boring, and that's how he's described. He's described as this kind of boring character that doesn't really have anything interesting going on. Now, I don't think this reflects one-to-one in his gameplay. The one thing that I think really would have helped this guy shine is if his second skill was targetable or was party-wide, and you'll see what I mean when we start getting into his stats and skills, but he could have been the sub-quick support that we have been desperately needing and wanting. I mean, we just got Jufu for the anniversary as more of a free-to-play art support, and she's really good in that role. Same thing for Asclepius, who just got a buff over on the JP side of things. They're both very strong, low-rarity art supports, but Quick just doesn't have that option and is in desperate need of that, because if you don't have Scotty or Ruler Scotty, what? Are you using Alexander for the quick buff and the attack buff? Ooh, that's kind of spicy. You're going to use Wu for the, you know, attack and quick buff. You know, it's not as impressive as, say, like Jufu giving you everything you would want, or Asclepius basically being a baby Castoria now, and that's more so on the free side. I know he's story locked, but again, like 3-star, easier to obtain than a limited 5-star, I would say, and he had the opportunity to be that, especially because he's on a good banner. Senno Rikyu is very, very strong, and a lot of players could have gotten him if they were going for Rikyu, but let's just go ahead and start breaking down this character. And as always, if you enjoy what I do, a like on the video and a subscription to the channel would be greatly appreciated, because even though I know this video is going to go out to like 5 people, I'm still committed, right? I got to cover all the servants, whether or not they're going to do good or they're going to do bad, you know, the information still got to get out there somehow. So let's just start diving into his kit, starting off with his hits. And yeah, I think this reflects his mild-mannered nature, because there's nothing really special going on here. I mean, you could point to his 0.81% NP gain and say, hey, this guy can do some really good refund on his crits, but it's not going to be anything super insane because his hits are very low, at 3 on the quicks, 2 on the arts, and 5 on that composite extra attack. But memes aside about the extra attack, he's not really doing anything super insane. It's pretty like middle of the road, not too good, not too bad, and I mean that's even reflected in his passive skills. There's nothing unique going on here. In an event where Rikyu and Io both have some pretty interesting passive skills, this guy really just has nothing. And I mean, even on top of that, the magic resistance and the riding he has are at D and E respectively. So not only are they kind of the boring basic passive skills, they're not even that good. Thankfully, his skills are pretty good. It's just, man, if that second skill was targetable or party-wide, this guy could have actually been a monster. Well, maybe not a monster, but would have been really good for a lot of players' boxes who don't have Scotty, or maybe even who don't have Castoria. You might be able to sub this guy in as a crit support. Because looking at this first skill, this is insanely promising. It's not the most nutty skill on the planet, but 20% attack for the entire party, 20% NP gain for the entire party, both for 3 turns, and just sending in 10 little stars to kind of get you started on turn 1 for some, you know, starting crits. That's not bad. That's not a bad warm-up skill, because everybody can appreciate getting some extra attack, and then the people that he would have been supporting if the second skill was targetable, the quick and art servants, would love to get some NP gain, but instead for some reason he just doesn't give anybody stuff on the second skill. But still, the NP gain is still appreciated for, say, a Castor you might bring alongside him, or say a Caster Scotty, because if you are going for Caster Scotty's cards, which you usually aren't, you can get to her NP, which admittedly is pretty strong. You just don't see it very often. I'm also of the opinion that if this skill was on a 5-turn cooldown, that might have had him stand out a little bit more, because then the uptime would be the skill effects are up for 3 turns and only down for 2, instead of it being even where they're up for 3 and down for 3. But again, maybe they didn't want him to stand out too much because he's supposed to be, again, this mild-natured, you know, kind of wet blanket type of character. And then moving into the second skill, this is the one that, man, can you imagine a a 30% quicken arts buff for 3 turns and a 20% battery. That's all for himself. Imagine if you could target that on somebody, or God forbid, this is a party-wide skill. I don't think giving 30% quick arts and 20% NP gain on a 6-turn cooldown would have been that broken at all whatsoever. In fact, it would probably be just what a quick servant would want. They can get a small little quick buff, they can get a nice little NP gain buff, a little bit of extra attack. Sure, it's not going to be replacing your Scotty or anything, but hey, going into a challenge quest, having this guy who can also kind of pseudo support you with the NP that we'll get to in a little bit, that actually could have meant something. That could have been a really good sub-quick support unit, and I think that's why for me, he's not so much forgettable, he's just very disappointing, because again, you can use this on himself, which, I mean, well, you have to use it on himself, but it does help out his NP gain on his arts cards and his quick cards, and he can get some decent refund going, and 20% gauge does help him get to his own NP. But if it's just going to be a self battery, make it 30%, make it 50%, because he has a support NP, and the one thing that supports really want to be able to do is instantaneously get into that NP. That's why double Castoria, they give each other 60% total with both of their charismas, or Proto Merlin herself can just immediately turn 1 fire her NP. Stuff like that is extremely valuable in support. And so the fact that you only have this middling 20% battery is just a little bit disappointing and a bit underwhelming. Sure, again, on him, you could do some decent damage, but the potential here was absolutely insane and it was completely squandered. The third skill is not bad though, because he is giving the entire party, it's basically Harp of Healing, you know, 1 hit of evasion for 3 turns, gives you a 3k heal, and then removes your damage over time debuff. So that's like curse, poison, burn, all that good stuff. And again, see, this is why I don't understand why the second skill is not a party-wide thing, or at least targetable, because the first skill and the third skill are party support skills. So you would think the second skill would at least, I don't know, at least have the battery be for the entire party. 20% for the entire party is not like that insane. I mean, look at Proto Merlin and Merlin with their charismas. They only give 20% on that, and that was perfectly fine. I don't know why they are really like gatekeeping him from being able to be even just a halfway decent support, because right now he's just a guy that is lacking in potential. You could still bring him to places, but you're just going to be missing out a little bit, because now he's oddly a little selfish with the second skill while also trying to support the entire party at the same time. It just leads to a very weird servant, right? And I guess we'll talk about the NP. The NP is not bad. Now, obviously, you ideally would want to bring a Shinsengumi servant ally, because you get that additional 50% crit damage for 3 turns. But the other stuff on here is not bad. 20 to 40% attack for the entire party scaling on NP level. That ain't bad. It's very similar to someone like, say, Castoria, except he's a 4-star, so it might be easier to get those copies, especially when they introduce the update that makes 4-star servants rates a lot higher, so they're easier to obtain. And then depending on overcharge, he's giving 10 to 30% party NP. That ain't bad, you know, that's nice that you just refund a little bit of your own NP whenever you fire your NP, and if you fire this last, you recharge everybody else's in the back of an NP chain. And if you do fire it last and say like a Castoria Proto Merlin NP chain, you know, you're getting 20%, if not 25%, because, you know, Proto Merlin actually overclocks your thing. So you could actually give the entire party a decent chunk of NP back. But see, this is why it's baffling to me that he doesn't actually support on the second skill, because think about the Shinsengumi servants. If he was giving them the art and quick buff that supports Okita, who's a quick servant, it supports Saito, who's an art servant, it supports Summer Okita Alter, who's a quick servant, and then it supports also the Summer Normal Okita, who is also a quick servant, which I think would have been perfectly fine, man. Like, I don't think giving these guys that additional 30% buff plus a 20% battery, an additional attack buff, I don't think that's too nutty, but instead they just kind of limited to just, no, you gotta do some crits. That's all they're allowed to do. They can only do additional crits. Because realistically, the only Shinsengumi guys he doesn't support is Hijikata, Shinpachi, and the normal Okita Alter. So he supports 4 out of the 3 other Shinsengumi servants, and they just, for some reason, didn't make that a thing. And when he came out, it was actually 4 of the 6, so it was the more of the majority until they released Shinpachi, you know, next year with the Kenshin banner. And so it just leaves me a little baffled as to what the direction for this servant is. You know, every now and then I'll review a new servant, or I'll look back at an older servant that I haven't thought about in quite a while. But this is one of those ones that I remember when he came out, I was just so baffled as to what they wanted us to do with this servant in particular. And it's really funny because Lysengal is releasing these new servant strategy things right on their channel occasionally. And so I'm gonna go back and see if they ever drop one for Yamanai over here, because I want to know what were they cooking? Was it just, oh, just throw him in there with Okita and, you know, Okita Jet Soji, you know, the assassin one, and then just call it a day? Is that really what they intend for us to do? Because sure, you might be able to get through some, you know, weaker bosses with that team comp, but any boss worth their salt is going to fold that like an omelet, and any, you know, meaningful challenge quest is also going to fold that like an omelet. So I just want to know what the intention was. Like, maybe they think it's fine to use double Yamanai because then he got like 3k heals on both of their third skills, and he also got dodges, but that's also not enough. And who is going to be doing that in the first place? He's just a rather weird servant that I think had so much potential. I think it's just, why is the second skill built the way it is? It would make so much sense that it's like, hey, you missed out on Ruler Scotty, but you summoned for Rikyu, you got her, and you got this weird Saber guy. Don't worry, you don't have to read his lore or anything. Just know he's going to support her. And I think that would be perfectly fine. I mean, that just makes sense. I mean, release a servant that could support the main banner servant on the same banner, right? Like, who would have thought? What a crazy idea. But again, I'm not mad. I'm not upset or anything. I don't want that to come out in this video that I seem like I'm upset or anything along those lines. I'm just more disappointed in this servant because I saw the potential. We could finally have somebody who could replace Wu as the sub quick support unit, because Wu in and of herself as a sub quick support unit, it's not anything super crazy. I mean, she's nothing compared to how like good Zhufu, Asclepius, even Paracelsus are as being these sub supports for the arts archetype. And so I thought we would finally get that, and it was just fumbled the ball at the very end. But there is still hope, you know? We've been getting a lot of very strong buffs over the past year over here on the JP side of things. And so if they remember that this guy exists, whenever we get the Gouda Gouda event this year, which Lord knows when that's going to be, maybe they remember he exists, they buff the second skill, maybe make it party-wide, just have it be a party-wide buff. I think that would be super nice for him. It wouldn't make him broken or anything, but it would make him a very decent, solid option if you don't have anything better. And I like having those. I like that some people will just have an option in their box as they're a newer player and kind of starting out. That's just all I want. You know, I just want the floor of the game to be a little bit higher as the ceiling of the game starts to raise more and more. I kind of want it to keep up with the power creep, but maybe that's an unrealistic expectation on my part. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. The whole like 5 people that are gonna watch this video. But again, like I said, sometimes you got to do the stinker servants that people really don't care about if you just gotta cover everything, right? I want to make sure that I cover absolutely everything over here on the channel. So if that determination tickles your pickle, then you could also drop a like on the video, maybe even subscribe to the channel. And let me know if you've used this servant at all and what your experience has been with them. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.